You guys have watched a lot more of my guide videos about the Otamatone than you have watched me actually playing it, so I've wanted to do another one of those for a while. Today I think I've got something worth talking about. How do you solve the problem of making this instrument sound like something that people want to actually listen to? Like if I play the same thing on the violin. The violin's a real instrument, the Otamatone's part instrument, part toy, and the Otamatone naturally sounds a little bit nasty. But over the years, I've found a few things to make it a little bit less nasty. This isn't an Otamatone. This is a real instrument, the violin that I play for a living. And when I make a good sound on the violin, a whole bunch of different parts go into that sound. Pitch, what note am I playing? Is it low or high? Is it a G sharp or is it a B flat? There's rhythm, when do I start playing the note and for how long do I play it? Both of those translate just fine to an Otamatone. There's also two slightly more advanced things that go into the Otamatone. Dynamics, playing soft or loud. And the other thing I just did there, which is vibrato, which is... I change the pitch up and down in a small range very fast, and this gives a little bit of a shimmer, a little bit of a polish to the tone I make. That can be done just fine in an Otamatone as well. I can vibrate the same way on an Otamatone that I do on the violin, but I have to do dynamics differently than I would on the violin. Vibrato without and with. When I shake my finger back and forth, it changes the pitch a little bit. It comes out sounding a little prettier. But for dynamics on the violin, I would press more with the bow, move the bow faster, do various things with the bow. I don't have a bow on an Otamatone. I have two ways of making my Otamatone louder or softer. The first, you can see the mouth. That makes a little bit of a wah-wah effect, like the mute I'll show you shortly on the violin. But if I don't want to do a wah-wah effect, I just move the Otamatone towards or away from the microphone. Now, my violin has an equivalent to closing the mouth on my Otamatone. It's just that we call it a mute. If I play normally, it rings a bit more. Then I put this little piece of rubber on top of the wooden bridge. It's going to dampen some of the vibrations, and it sounds... It's a little bit softer, but it's not much softer. But the color changes a lot. Now, if I put a big mute on, we don't normally do this in an orchestra. Composers normally don't call for the big mute, but here's what it sounds like. Not only does it sound muted, it gets a lot softer. And that big mute to me resembles closing the mouth on an Otamatone. It's not just softer, it also sounds differently. But when I do this kind of dynamics, if I want to do that on an Otamatone, I've got to move from or away from the mic. I could also mess with the volume control on the back, but I don't grip my Otamatone in a way that allows me to do that while I play. Unfortunately, the next part of making a good sound doesn't translate very well to the Otamatone, and that's making a difference between this and this. Articulation means how does the note start? And a lot of articulation comes down to starting the note a little bit sharper or a little bit louder, and then having the sound cut back down to its normal volume. I can approximate a little bit of this on the Otamatone, but not nearly as well, any instrument in the orchestra could do it. Here's what it sounds like when I try to articulate notes on an Otamatone. Most of the articulation appears in my eyebrows rather than in the sound, because I'm trying really, really hard to get that mouth open and then close it fast enough to shut down the sound so that it sounds like I played an accent. If this thing was a violin, I'd do that with the bow, and it would make a louder sound with a sharper start at the start of the note and then get back down, and I'd have the accent I'm trying to put on. If it was a piano, I'd hammer the key harder, and you'd hear articulation at the start of the note. When I try to do this in an Otamatone video, I usually end up hammering the fingerboard of the Otamatone as hard as I can. Even though intellectually I know this will not produce an accent, I'm trying so hard to do something that the instrument can't do. However, you can produce an articulated sound after the fact, editing the sound. And that's something I've only added recently when I've been doing some orchestra pieces on Otamatones. Before I forget and go on to the next subject, you can do one kind of articulation on an Otamatone pretty well. That's me playing off the string. I bounce the bow onto the string, and it makes very short notes that have a little bit of percussive quality. I can't really add the bounce sound effect on an Otamatone, but I can press my fingers very, very briefly on the fingerboard. It's a little bit like trying to do a really hard short hop in Smash Brothers, which I'm having a hard time learning. As you can see, I had a hard time doing that, but it sounds surprisingly like playing a violin off the string rather than on. Oh god, this is hard. Now I'm finally ready to talk about tone color, which is just, does the Otamatone sound like a violin, like an oboe, like the human voice, or like a cat preparing to vomit? Those could all be at the same pitch, but they sound very different, and you may want to listen to some of these sounds more than others. And we're going to solve that the same way that we solve two other little problems with the Otamatone. One is this noise from opening and closing the mouth, and the other is this noise that you get because there's a little metal piece on the back where you would attach a strap, and that metal piece can make noises. The nice thing is the metal piece's noise, the mouth opening noise, and the ugly parts of an Otamatone sound all occur at about the same frequency, which is about 8,000 hertz or cycles per second. And that means that we can wipe all three of these problems out with an equalizer. This is my Audacity setup with some Otamatone sound in all three ranges already recorded, and I'm going to start by playing it to you with just the original sound without any editing going on first. So this is the sort of thing you'd hear in my first few videos. No reverb, no equalization, no compressor, and no artificial accents. So if I select all of this, I'm going to start by showing you what I like to do to this, and this is called the equalizer tool. All of these dials change the volume of different frequencies. You've got your low frequencies, your boomy sounds at the left, you've got your high frequencies, your tinny sounds at the right, and that little, this sound and the buzz all tend to be around 8,000 cycles per second, which is right here, which is why I've got a low point there. This is my default filter that I tend to apply to Otamatone videos nowadays. And here's what it sounds like, that same clip with that filter applied. If you listen to it, you can tell that I edited it, but it doesn't sound edited within an inch of its life. And then, of course, I typically throw a little bit of reverb on it. I tend to go for a small amount of reverb, which is why I'm turning down the room size and reverberance. This basically just means there's going to be less reverb. But even a small amount of reverb serves to sort of smooth out sandpaper-like stuff in your sound by averaging it out over small intervals of time. I'm sure there's a clearer way to sound that, but I'm sure there's a clearer way I could say that, but reverb smooths out your sound. And I like to use a small amount of reverb so that it's not too blatant. The third thing I want to show you on this is, let's say, during this end part when I go do-do-do-dum, on the Otamatone. I wish the Otamatone worked more like a violin, and I want to play do-do-do-ba. So I'm going to do that by amplifying it, literally make a fake accent. The amplification tool defaults to doing the maximum possible amplification, so I'm going to take only a 3 decibel amplification on the start of the note. Then I'm going to select the start of that start and amplify by another 3, and the start of that start, and amplify that by another 3. And I end up with an effect that just sounds like you hit the start of the note. I'd also use something like this if I wanted to make an Otamatone sounded like a plucked violin string. And those are the main things that I do to edit the sound, is playing around with amplification, a light amount of reverb, in that particular equalization. Now, if I wanted to do this sort of like commercial mainstream sound, I can also use the same tools to do that. So if I go here, I have undone my normal equalization. I'm going to take this one, which if you notice is a lot farther from the center line. This one is super boomy in the low registers, and it's damped all through the higher register. And when I apply this, you're going to hear something that sounds a lot more blatant, a lot more sort of commercial or pop music-y, and also generally kind of prettier. And this is just the equalization filter. Most people are going to find this a lot easier to listen to, and if I see an Otamatone video that's someone playing and they have 1 million views, it's probably something like this, the absolute blatant sound editing, because it's not really about the performance, it's about creating something that people want to listen to. And I'm going to throw about 3 times as much reverb, something like 3 times as much reverb as I did previously on this to make the commercial sound of the reverb. And if you listen to other people's Otamatone channels, like the ones that are really memey and have all the clickbait titles, yeah, you've heard this sound. And it's a nice sound. I should probably use it for something. I'll probably, if I do some sort of pop song thing, I'll probably just use a blatant sound like this and go with it and see how it does. Could turn out that it ends up getting more views than anything else I've made. The other thing I wanted to show you on this is something that I don't personally use anymore, but it's also a recommended tool most of the time, and that's just something called a compressor. What this does is it makes soft sounds softer and loud sounds louder. There's not much more to it than that. If you've got a lot of sound if you've got a lot of little clicks and pops and opening the mouth and closing, maybe not all of those are at 8,000 cycles per second, so the equalizer won't wipe them out, but the compressor will make them too soft relative to the other sounds for you to hear them. This is what that commercial sound sounds like with a compressor added. I don't use a compressor because generally use the compressor because I do a lot of stuff where 2 voices will play at the same time at different values, and if I apply a compressor after doing that, the loud voice gets louder and the soft voice gets softer, and I usually have a specific balance I want to strike between those 2 voices, because a lot of the time I'm doing something with classical music written for an orchestra where that's part of the design. And so, as we say it, the balance goes all to hell when you throw a compressor on it. I've taken the commercial equalization off, so to put it, and now I'm going to show you, I'm really going to bring out that nasty spike at 8,000 by giving you an equalization curve that brings that up rather than down. And I have used this, I used it as a contrast for about 10 seconds in the Black Otamatone. This is not a filter that you want to use if you want people to listen to what you make. unless you're using it as a small contrast, and there's some artistic reason for it. As you can hear, it sounds extra nasty. This sound is why I cut the sound at 8,000 cycles per second, because when you emphasize it, it sounds really bad. And I think that's everything I needed to show you in Audacity.